Welcome and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, to our fifth workshop and PhD seminar series in business management. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, we started an important topic for our discussion, and we thought that this is an important area where most PhD students find difficulties. So we are still dealing with the topic of navigating the PhD terrain, but specifically this time we are looking at identifying a PhD research topic, or what you may actually call an important aspect of a PhD, going into identifying a research problem and research gaps, ladies and gentlemen. And I know that our fifth workshop will specifically go into that issue of identifying research gaps. In this lecture, I do not intend to go into the depth of it, but I'll be talking about identifying a PhD research topic and a research question. And this is under our broader heading of navigating the PhD terrain, ladies and gentlemen. Now, in this lecture, ladies and gentlemen, the number of aspects that we are going to cover, just to give you the outline, I'll give you an introduction. I will also go into getting your PhD working environment, where you can work independently, or you can collaborate with your colleagues, you can collaborate with professors. Those are issues that we shall cover under getting your PhD working environment. The other issue we shall cover is identifying a research problem, identifying a research question, and identifying a research gap, ladies and gentlemen. And then thereafter, I will introduce you to questions that professors usually ask at that material time when you are developing research questions, research problems, and so forth, ladies and gentlemen. So join me in this lecture to discuss these important issues. Now, in a form of introduction, I want to say, ladies and gentlemen, that before writing your PhD thesis, you need to you need to know what you want to research. You actually must decide in advance what you want to learn. And of course, this takes us into really trying to figure out the areas where we are going to do research. A PhD thesis is expected to break new ground for a discipline, and that's why your PhD will certainly be identified with a particular discipline. And in the process of breaking that ground, you as the researcher, you become proficient at conducting research. Now, although there is a common belief in research, and especially amongst students, and about this concept of research, that we try to research or do research to confirm or prove assumptions. And I want to say that this is really very inaccurate, very inaccurate. Rather, research is a process of searching repeatedly and researching for new insights and a more comprehensive, cohesive, elegant theory, ladies and gentlemen. So we research for new insights, and we research for a more comprehensive, cohesive, elegant theory, ladies and gentlemen. So there are probably few, if any, truth, immutable, never-changing facts. And of course, in this perspective, I want to again invite you to go and attend my lectures, which I have more or less come up with in the past about truth. I have lectures on truth. Please make sure that you attend these lectures so that you understand. And that's why I'm saying there are very, very few, if any, truth which are immutable and never-changing facts. Because of this, we continually search for information, we search for truth, and each research project intends to advance our knowledge so that we get closer to the truth. And all studies are limited by time, if nothing else. But whenever you pick a journal article and you read, you'll find that section where we talk about limitations of the study. So there is no single research that doesn't have those limitations. So that's why we continue to search for the truth. And all studies are limited by time and so many other things. So findings from research allow us to make potentially more accurate predictions. But predictions and hypotheses are not guarantees, ladies and gentlemen. And while each research project contributes to our growing knowledge, there are qualitative differences in research studies. And certainly, as I've already said, it's very difficult to find those things which constitute truth, which are never changing. So each research project contributes to our growing knowledge. Therefore, in terms of qualitative differences. And not all research projects are equally useful. Some are poorly conceived and conducted, while others are carefully conceptualized and operationalized and analyzed. You will need to decide if your study will be quick and data, and that's a decision that you have to take as a student. And of course, if you take up a study that is very quick and data, trying to fulfill the letter of the requirement, of course, here we are saying you need a PhD, and then you say, well, let me do a quick one and a data one, and then fulfill the requirements of a PhD. If you want to do that without really thinking about advancing knowledge or a serious attempt at least to contribute to our academic world, then of course you have your own ambitions and objectives and so forth, but a PhD does not aim at doing that, ladies and gentlemen. Now, for some people, for students on this program, this decision is not easy, and some doctoral students just want to get done. Others hold that if they are spending their time, they want the result to be potentially useful. And if you are in that category, then you must really pay attention to the things that I'm talking about, because you are not interested in merely an academic exercise which will collect dust on a library somewhere or shelf, but or even use up space in a library or database when it is finished. You need to really think through your project very well. And clearly, the more time you devote to planning and doing your study, the more likely it will make a contribution to your discipline, ladies and gentlemen. So similarly, the less time you devote to thinking about your study, the less likely it will have any impact beyond perhaps qualifying you to receive your degree. There is nothing that is so annoying as somebody who has simply come on the program because probably he thinks that he must get those three letters, the P, H, and D, without really knowing that a PhD aims at advancing knowledge in a particular discipline, ladies and gentlemen. So it's quite important for you to think about these things. So the less time you devote to thinking about your study, the less likely it will have an impact beyond perhaps qualifying you to receive your doctoral degree. And there is another element to consider in this equation, ladies and gentlemen. The professors at your institution, they are very important, and therefore you must get to know who they are and their areas of interest so that you advance very well. And this is important because ultimately some professors will need to sign their names as supporters of your PhD thesis. Of course, at the end of the day, if you are going to look for these people that you are going to work with, then it becomes necessary to really look out for them. And of course, some of these professors may place their emphasis on the doctoral student learning to conduct independent research. And therefore, if you are not aware of this, you may start complaining that, the professor is spending too much time probably going through this. He has asked me to do A, B, and C, and so forth. So most of the professors are actually interested that you grow academically and in scholarship, and that at the end of the day, you'll be able to undertake independent research, ladies and gentlemen. So your decision about the tack you'll take in doing your PhD thesis cannot be made in isolation. So you need to know about the generally acceptable practice in your department and make your decision with this knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. And for most, the identification of what to study evolves slowly as they come as they become immersed in a variety of concepts, a variety of theories, philosophies, and research in the required area, ladies and gentlemen. I know that some students enter a program with a clear idea of what they want to do for their PhD thesis, but not everybody is at this level. And there are at least two schools of thought about when to identify your research focus. And I'll just take you through some of these two things so that you really get a grasp of what we are talking about. And the first one is that the area in your coursework you decide on an area of study, the better. And that is one school of thought, that you focus all of your attention on the issue, trying to connect all assignments and readings to your research focus, ladies and gentlemen. So that's a thought that believes that the earlier in your coursework you decide on an area of study, the better. Now, the second school of thought goes that the later in the process you decide, the better. And some people think like this, by the way. And in this case, they feel that once you go through the taught component, with this extended knowledge, you are in position to see where there are gaps and conflicts in your discipline, and you may design a study which will lead to expanding your discipline's knowledge. So clearly, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, there are benefits and limitations to each perspective. And of course, number one, as I said earlier, the one which believes that you need to decide on your topic a little bit early as soon as you start on your coursework, that has advantages and disadvantages as well. And the second one, where people believe that you must go through the taught component so that you decide on the area of study, that is also another useful insight, but it also has limitations and strength, as you can see. Now, a middle ground is probably most productive, wherein you gradually focus while maintaining interest in a wide range of potential research areas. And ladies and gentlemen, ultimately the time will arrive when you are ready and to start on your PhD. And there are many essential ingredients which contribute to your readiness to start writing your PhD thesis. Of course, I can give you some academic and personal characteristics of doctoral students who are ready to continue with their PhDs and probably to get into research. And you can see those ones here on the screen. But I'll just highlight these things just in brief. The first point is that that student who is ready to proceed somehow demonstrates a sense of wonder, a sense of interest, even excitement about a specific topic or question. So he will be talking about it quite often, because he has piqued interest in that area, and of course he has that sense of wonder. The second characteristic is that of extensive familiarity with the literature. So the student will review, will read as many journal articles as possible in that particular area. He will even consult theories and consult professors. So there is extensive familiarity with the literature and the current state of knowledge in the field or discipline of your doctoral program. So if a student demonstrates this, then you know that the fellow is advancing. The third aspect is that of encouragement and support for you and your ideas. So you see that the student is somehow encouraged and is supported by other people and has been discussing with so many other fellows. So this becomes an important element. Then, of course, the other one is time to work on the project, and then a desire to contribute to a discipline or field. Now, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, these things that I'm mentioning, including determination to complete the doctoral degree program and go on with life beyond school, are some of the academic and personal characteristics of doctoral students who are ready, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as you can see, I'm going to give you some kind of guide on how you can actually work through your doctoral program without really having very major issues in this case, ladies and gentlemen. So these are very important aspects, and you need to really think about them and move along with these things. Now, as a doctoral student who is ready, you might want to assess your own readiness for getting started, of course, using the grid that I'm just showing on the screen here. Now, of course, what I'm asking you to do is very simple, to place a tick next to those items which describe you at this material time, and place also a minus next to those items which are missing at this material time. Now, as you can see on the screen, ladies and gentlemen, we have about 6 major aspects that you are going to evaluate to see how ready you are. In terms of columns, the first column represents a category, the second column represents examples or potential criteria, and of course the last column is where you are supposed to put a rating, which is a minus if you are not ready, and a plus, which is actually a tick if you are probably ready with this particular aspect. Now, of course, in the rows, as you can see from the screen here, we've got those aspects that I want you to really use to assess your own readiness for getting started on this particular grid. Of course, the second point is what we call the sense of wonder or interest, excitement about a specific topic, or probably a question. So put a plus if you think you are ready. And of course, in this case, the example in this material time for you to demonstrate that you've reached this level is to outline a talk on your topic for a 10-minute presentation. And you can always do this and share with your students, fellow students, and of course, the other people like the professors and the advisors and so forth. The second aspect that you can use to make an evaluation or judgment is extensive familiarity with the literature and the current state of knowledge in the field. So, of course, here you can list 10 key references and the main thesis that you have come across. Now, if you really have these things, then, of course, in terms of rating, you can put a tick, meaning that you are ready and you have really considered these things here. Now, of course, the third aspect is encouragement and support for me and my ideas within my program. And here you can name 3 faculty or 3 professors and 3 peers who support your interest, ladies and gentlemen. So if this is happening to you, then you can go ahead and say that you have actually reached this level and you are through with it. Now, if you are not yet through with these things, then start because you don't have enough time on the PhD. Otherwise, you may end up taking 10 years on the PhD program. The other aspect that you have to think about is time to work on the project, ladies and gentlemen. So here again, examples will include identify a block of time each day when you work on your dissertation. So you can list, or you can even tell us that kind of time that you have blocked. As I said in the previous lectures, it is not good for you not to really focus on your PhD on any particular day. So on a daily basis, you must have a program which will enable you to at least think about those particular PhD ideas and read and write. And this must be a daily exercise. Now, the other aspect you could use to evaluate your readiness is a desire to contribute to a discipline or field. So what desire do you have? And of course here, as an example, you can explain the potential impact of your study, ladies and gentlemen. So that's another aspect that you can use in evaluating your readiness to study a PhD. Now, the other aspect you could use is a determination to complete the doctoral program. What determination do you have? So in terms of examples of the things that you should look at, as you are still seeing this on the screen here, is what will you place on hold while you immerse yourself in your dissertation? Because there are so many other competing things that you'll be doing. You don't simply stop everything and then you say, now this is PhD for 3 years or 4 years. There will be so many other things that come in there. But you must have a trade-off. It's a question of an opportunity cost in this kind of thing. So do you have plans for those things that we call after dissertation, right? So ladies and gentlemen, these are really very, very important issues that you must think about. So ladies and gentlemen, now that you have gone through this evaluation, I think you have already noted your current status on those particular 6 characteristics. You need to consider and respond to that evaluation without any problem. Now, if at least 3 items are checked, ladies and gentlemen, you are probably ready to start on your PhD. But if less than 3 are checked, you will need to consider, right, seriously, you will need to consider, right, seriously those things and consciously work on establishing your readiness before proceeding. Now, of course, in the ideal world, if all items had checks next to them, you would progress very rapidly, ladies and gentlemen. And in the real world, we try to have as many of these issues covered as we can. And clearly, we cannot do this project alone. There are so many other stakeholders. It takes a large number of people working with you to accomplish this. In fact, when you start a PhD, you discover that there are many stakeholders. Your spouse will be in it. Your children will be in it. The people you've been associating with, your close associates, will be in it because they will not be seeing you most of the time. A PhD is a lonely journey that you take, and therefore you must be prepared for this lonely journey, ladies and gentlemen. So there are so many stakeholders, and you must actually learn to think about these things and work on them a little bit early enough, and remembering or bearing in mind that our lives become increasingly complex and integrated into others' lives as we take on additional responsibilities. Now, this factor alone makes it difficult for an adult to isolate herself or himself for any extended period of time, and yet this PhD requires that isolation. Getting done with a PhD thesis usually takes obsessive dedication, with a PhD thesis becoming the most important activity in a person's life for a finite time. Now, of course, this observation that I've just given you suggests that the sooner you start, ladies and gentlemen, the more rapidly you progress, the more you are likely to graduate. But if you relax a little bit, it won't be easy for you. And there are advantages to moving quickly in this process. And the research you have read in your coursework remains current, ladies and gentlemen. The professors interested in your research questions are ready to work with you. Your questions continue to intrigue you, and your responsibilities to others are also manageable, ladies and gentlemen. Now, knowing what is likely to be expected at each stage of the process of a PhD thesis writing will enable you to take charge of this activity in your life, and you'll be in control of your PhD, ladies and gentlemen. So, those are major things that you must think about. And I want to really take you to another aspect which is very important. That was the second item I outlined in the structure of our presentation in this workshop. So the second aspect is that of creating your PhD thesis working environment. You must really create your working environment, ladies and gentlemen. And there are multiple ways to work on a PhD thesis, right? So you need to realize this. And while there are multiple ways to work on a PhD thesis, there are three typical ways to get started. And the first one, you may decide to work independently. The second one is for you to work collaboratively with other students in your PhD program. And the third one is working in a consultation with the professors or the directors, PhD directors or program directors, and so forth. Now, your working environment could take many forms, but I've decided to give you these three. And I think I am showing these on the screen, and on the screen here I have a figure that I have called figure 1, creating your working environment, and one set of options. So those three, the ones which I've articulated, working independently. The second is what you have there as working collaboratively, of course, either with the colleagues or professors. And of course, the third one is that of working in a consultation with faculty or probably your professors and so forth. So ladies and gentlemen, let us now briefly describe these three aspects that we have. So we need to consider the advantages and the disadvantages of these three so that you really understand these things very well. So I'll start with the first one, working independently. Here you are totally in control when you're working independently. You set the time. You set the pace, you set the focus, you critique your work, you decide when it is ready for external review. Now, if you are a self-starter, this might be a good model, ladies and gentlemen. If you get easily discouraged and then stop working, this will not be a good setting for you. So you cannot really take up this element of working independently because of those weaknesses. If you have more confidence in your own views than in anyone else's view, you will not be sidetracked by potentially differing perspectives. And that's why working independently in this case might work. If you are good at reflecting on your own work, finding where your text is unclear and where additional resources are needed, for example, then working independently may be a good thing for you. Being familiar with your own working style, ladies and gentlemen, will help you to decide if this setting will be productive for you or not. So let's go to the second aspect, which was collaborating with the student colleagues, before I turn to the third one, which is collaborating with the professors. But the second one is collaborating with the student. And these are peers. In fact, in some universities, you have what we call communities of practice. So students are encouraged to get into groups and then meet. You know, you'll find a certain particular PhD cohort, right, having a community of practice. So they meet and discuss these things right from time to time. So, of course, as I already said, collaboration can take several forms. But since you are dealing with the collaborating with the student colleagues, you could restrict your group, that community of practice, to include only student colleagues who are on your program. Or you could create a more expansive group to include people from other disciplines, and of course other programs as well, especially if you have a number of PhD programs at your university. For example, at the business school, Makerere University Business School, you've got, you have a PhD program in energy economics, and this is a taught program. But then you also have the other PhD by thesis only. So if you want to get that cross-fertilization of ideas, you could have a community of practice that has people from PhD energy economics and then from the other PhD research by thesis only. Now, of course, the choice is yours. You are talking about collaborating with peers. But there are those who prefer to have cohorts. You see, cohort 1, yeah, that is a community of practice. Cohort 2, you have a community of practice. Cohort 3, right. And there are those who prefer to really use discipline-based, right? That if you are in the area of accounting and finance, we shall have our own cohort. Those who are in the area of maybe entrepreneurship, they will have another cohort, etc., etc. Now, of course, others may decide to draw on doctoral students across many programs. I've already said at your university, or including colleagues from your workplace. I also know that at Uganda Matters University in Kozi, for instance, they've got the PhD by thesis only, and they also have a PhD which is taught in business management. So you could also have that cross-fertilization, or you can decide to have community of practice depending on the cohorts as well. So you could also restrict your group to 1 or 2 other people, or probably many people, or you could have a relatively large group of 7 or 8 people discussing those particular aspects. So your comfort level and your experiences working in groups and your familiarity with the other students on the program will all contribute to the form of this collaborative group, ladies and gentlemen. So the size of the group and the frequency of the meetings may vary over time as group members progress or get diverted to other projects. Now, when you collaborate with others, you determine mutually agreeable times and places to work. You start and stop in collaboration with others. So you are really in control. Your progress at a rate. You see, what will happen at the end of the day as a student, you will be able to progress at a rate comfortable for those in a group. So your advancement will be monitored by your group and facilitated or restricted by them. And in a collaborative group, your knowledge is enriched by sharing with your collaborators. Now, when the experiences and expertise of all the members in the group contribute to the progress of each participant, a collaborative setting is considered to be very useful in particular aspect. I want to turn to the third component, which is collaborating with the program professors. It's very important that you work with the professors because at the end of the day, your PhD thesis has to be accepted by the program professors. And if you know that and you have that at the back of your mind, then you cannot really afford to work alone, ladies and gentlemen. So quite often doctoral students have to identify 1 or 2 professors to guide their programs. And this is very important because once they direct and guide your progress, you'll be able to move very, very fast. Now, of course, students depend exclusively on these professors to direct them to appropriate readings, to tell them when and what to write or even revise. They tell the students when and where to do their data collection. They tell the students the journal articles they should read, the books they should read, the theories they should refer to, ladies and gentlemen. So in this scenario, a student, by the way, as this student goes through the mentorship of this professor for quite a long time, a student may be overly influenced by the biases and preferences of the professor regarding the differences in opinion in the discipline or field. And the student, again, might become something of a clone of the professor, depending on the style of the professor and the student, ladies and gentlemen. A student may also have easier access to many professors while developing ideas in the field, and perhaps unpublished works as well. So if you're working with the Professor John, I believe that at that material time, you will be able to access his unpublished works and even the published works. And when you collaborate with that professor, then it becomes quite important, certainly. And that's why when you're thinking of collaboration, you need to look for professors who are actively involved in research. So collaborate with the professor who is actively researching in the field of specialization where you have interest. Now, as you can see, of course, in Africa, we've got a very big problem. you will not really find many people who are doing research. But for those who are doing research, please make sure that you collaborate with them. So as you can see, the student in this setting knows how at least one professor will respond to the work which she or he is doing, and knows where to revise, he knows where to elaborate, and when to get ready for public presentation or defenses in this case. Now, since the professor has more power than the student in the university setting, ladies and gentlemen, the professor as a colleague is not really a truly collaborative arrangement, as you can see. So you need to really be mindful and very careful when you are collaborating with these professors. Each of these settings certainly will help you move on very well, whether you take the independent setting, work setting, or you probably work with your colleagues or probably work with professors at the same time, ladies and gentlemen. So in this case, as you can see, each of those settings I've just given you will offer many advantages to the doctoral student. They also present potential obstacles to completion, and do not forget that. And as you work with those aspects, the three working environment, you need to be mindful of those things. But anyway, because some of them can make you progress, while others may actually limit your progress, we need to think of alternative settings. So you might start in one setting and then move back and forth among the settings, ladies and gentlemen. So on the screen here, as you can see, I am showing you that kind of relationship, right, of the three. And you can actually juggle through as you think about those alternative settings. So on the screen here, I've called this figure 2, creating your working environment. And that's really an alternative view. One circle is for working independently, another circle working with your peers, the students, and then of course working with professors. But you can also have a combination of this. You will have an intersection somewhere, and of course you can also have a mix of independence and also with the students and so forth. So that figure, or this figure that you see on the screen here, will certainly help you move on. And there are many places where you might choose to start, and you need to create the settings which will expedite your progress, ladies and gentlemen. So having said that, ladies and gentlemen, now allow me to move to yet an important component that I highlighted during or at the start of this lecture. And I'm sure you remember that third element was identifying your research problem, ladies and gentlemen. So it's very important that you start thinking about your research topic, you start thinking about the research problem that you are going to investigate, ladies and gentlemen. So in this area of identifying a research problem or identifying a research question, ladies and gentlemen, you may have a burning desire to try a study, that study probably is based on a research problem or question similar to the one that you have read. And there's always this temptation, and you want to probably do it in a different setting. But of course, for some students, the idea is not about really doing this same research in another setting. The idea is to copy, because they are devoid of research ideas at that material time. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to tell you that you really have to think through your research problem. And I'm going to give you tips on how you can identify your research problem, how you can identify your research question, and how you can identify your research gap, ladies and gentlemen. So it is crucial in the process of selecting a research problem or a research question that you choose one which is exciting to you. Don't simply pick a topic because somebody else has done it. No, pick one that is exciting. Pick one that you will advance your learning in that particular field or discipline, and pick one where you intend to contribute knowledge, right? So it is very important that you do that, and if the research problem or a question is not intriguing to you, if it is not exciting to you, experience, ladies and gentlemen, tells us that you are not likely to be able to get up the energy to work on it independently at, for instance, 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning, right? So choose a topic which you think is very intriguing, and you can't easily go to bed and rest without reading a journal article. So something that you get wholly immersed into, right? It's very important. Now, if you don't have that enthusiasm to wake up at around 4 a.m. and study, then you may actually abandon that topic as well. So the place to start is to find a research question, a research problem which is of keen interest to you personally and professionally. Now, you may ask, how do I find that research problem, that research question? You may consider some options which I'm going to give you. For example, number one, you may draw on the knowledge which you acquired in your coursework and from your independent reading and journal writing, ladies and gentlemen. Or two, you engage in dialogues with professors about topics which might be acceptable, knowing that your PhD thesis will only get done with the assistance and support of that professor. The third way of identifying these research topics and problems is through collaboration. So you collaborate with the student colleagues, discussing the topics they are contemplating for their research, using recently accepted PhD thesis as samples of what your PhD thesis needs to represent. You can as well pick out certain ideas. And within the thesis that have been completed by your colleagues, they have made recommendations for future research in those theses. So the fourth area or advice, you draw on your personal and professional experiences. Many of you who are pursuing your PhDs or pursuing PhDs, you have been working, and some of you have been teaching for a very long time. So you can actually draw from your personal and professional experience. Five, you can undertake the theoretical review, right? For those who are interested in reading journal articles, you may undertake a theoretical review, but you could also make observations and consultations with experts in a particular discipline, and of course focus on that particular area that has a strong theoretical foundation on which to claim legitimacy, ladies and gentlemen. So the sixth advice is for you to anchor your study within your discipline with the purpose of increasing knowledge in your field. And the seventh aspect is, again, the theoretical review will help you demonstrate your thorough comprehension of your field of study and be able to intelligently critique others' study, ladies and gentlemen. So that is very important and useful, but I'll give you another eighth point which we are going to discuss in detail. So these are approaches to identifying research gaps. I want now to spend about some few minutes discussing research gaps, ladies and gentlemen. So some of the approaches to identify research gaps and generate research questions. First, let us start with a question. What is a research gap? Do we know what it is? A research gap is a research question or research problem, ladies and gentlemen, which has not been answered appropriately or at all in a given field of study. I know when we tell you to look for research gaps, some people do not know that you are actually dealing with a research question or a research problem, and those are the things I've been presenting in the previous few minutes, right? So if you are interested in research gaps raised, a research gap is a research question or research problem which has not been answered appropriately or at all in a given field of study, and you must look for these things. A research gap is actually what makes your research acceptable for a PhD study, and it's what makes your paper acceptable or accepted in a journal for publication. So for your work to become publishable, you must have a research gap. But I'm also mindful of the fact that there are some journals which are practice-oriented, and they don't really bother very much about this element of a research gap. But as an academic, you must think about that, because that's what a PhD requires. So, and a research gap is what makes your work publishable, and you will be required to publish a few papers before you graduate on your program, 2 journal articles in this case. And research gaps are very important. Why? Because it shows you that you are not just duplicating existing research, ladies and gentlemen. It shows that you have a deep understanding of the status of the body of knowledge in your chosen field. And it also demonstrates and shows that you have conducted research which fulfills that gap in the literature. Now, researchers, particularly those pursuing masters or PhD, often find it difficult to identify the gaps in the body of knowledge in their own chosen fields. Now, identifying gaps and generating research questions can be regarded as the first and the most important step in writing a research project or research paper or pursuing your PhD. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to start thinking about research gaps. I want you to start identifying research gaps. Quite often when I teach PhD students, I give them a number of I give them a task to identify journal articles about a particular aspect that they are interested in, and I task them to identify a research gap. And this is exactly what you will be doing in these workshops, ladies and gentlemen. So you are required to identify a research gap, and the time is not tomorrow. Right, the time was actually yesterday, and the time is now. If you didn't do it yesterday, please do it right now, because identifying research gaps and generating research questions is regarded as the first and the most important step in writing a research project. Of course, there are many approaches for overcoming this difficulty of really finding research gaps. But finding original and innovative topics, distinguishing gaps in the literature is never an easy feat, ladies and gentlemen. So there are different approaches to employ, and not all researchers, especially young ones, are aware of them, and that's why I'm articulating these things in these workshops. Now here we'll try to briefly discuss some of these things that you can take up. And for starters, considering the gap finding issue, 3 classes of researchers can be distinguished. So I'm going to again begin by classifying those 3 types of researchers so that you know what their orientations are. Now, the first class is mainly the class of researchers who act according to their personal enthusiasm. And these researchers certainly have complete proficiency in the chosen field, which is the result of years of experience or a rich body of knowledge acquired after covering all the important papers in their field, ladies and gentlemen. So they end up really reading a number of journal articles and, of course, trying to identify these things, ladies and gentlemen. So it's important for us to work. It's very important for us to consider, because that group of researchers that I've already articulated, which is the first class, which focuses mainly on their personal enthusiasm. They believe they have experience in the area, they have covered a number of things, and therefore they can actually start thinking about their research projects. Now, of course, the second one, ladies and gentlemen, is encouraged by what we call peripheral factors. And even the third one will be influenced by peripheral factors. But in this case, the peripheral that I'm going to talk about relate to professors. So I know that there are those students who will be doing research because they have been interacting with the professors, and professors having that rich body of knowledge in a particular area, they can make recommendations. So a researcher may choose a particular university and a certain professor because that professor might have a specific project in hand, and he may suggest this project to you. Of course, in this case, you would investigate, and if the project is close to your expectations for a master's or PhD, then you will select that particular project, and then you'll be working with the professor. And this happens quite often, especially in those universities where you have professors with the projects, and maybe they expected to and one of the outcomes of the project is actually to train maybe 2 or 3 PhDs. So you can be taken on by a professor, and then you work with a professor on that particular project, and then at the end of the day you will graduate with a PhD, and that will be one of the outputs for that particular PhD. And this is sort of that particular project. And this is true for professors who write proposals, grant proposals. So they respond to calls, and then they put those companies there. Some of them add masters, so they even graduate around 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or even 10 masters, depending on the nature of the project, ladies and gentlemen. So the third category of researchers, it is really the same story with the third group, with the second group, but the third aspect here is that we are dealing with the peripheral factor, but this time not the professor who forces the researcher to select a topic, but of course the decision to choose a topic is dictated by the environment that the researcher has grown up in, and the needs of that environment, the society where the fellow has been staying, and the people he has been interacting with will force him to focus mostly on those particular aspects. Maybe he has been living in a community that is suffering from poverty, so this fellow wants to examine this concept of poverty. Maybe has been deeply swallowed up and swamped up in agriculture, then the fellow will choose a topic in that area. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, those are the 3 kinds of researchers. So far we have discussed 3 classes of researchers, each of whom chooses a topic in a different way. But what if you are not knowledgeable in your field? What if you do not want to choose a topic based on your professor's interest? What if environmental factors are not of importance to you? So how do you then move? Maybe those are the questions at the back of your mind. Well, I can only say, ladies and gentlemen, there are other approaches that you can use in order to find a research gap, a research topic, or even a popular trend in your chosen field of study. And some are certainly simple, while other methods that I'm going to recommend to you are a little bit sophisticated. But the easiest way would be to read specific parts of the articles, journal articles in your field of study. And of course, there may be hundreds of articles in your field, but you have to find the most suitable ones by measuring their value and finding out how influential they are. And after finding the most suitable journal articles, there are tools which can help you in this regard, ladies and gentlemen. But we are not discussing them right here. In this workshop, I will not discuss those particular aspects. But there are tools which you can use to examine the parts or examine those papers or articles, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, I can only say that when you pick those suitable journal articles, let me give you the kind of guidance, the things that you should look out for quite easily. One, you can always go to the introduction section of any particular journal. And this introduction section, ladies and gentlemen, always has a sentence or 2 about the reasons why that research is done. So that is where you can locate, you start locating research gaps, right? So that particular section is very important. You can also go to the conclusion section because the conclusion certainly tells you a number of things. They're concluding the entire study. And then you can also go to the last bit of a journal article which talks about suggestions for future research, or even where you have limitations of the study, ladies and gentlemen. Now, of course, in the area of suggestions for future research, that's a section in which the author of the article, having examined the literature and conducted the research himself, would point his readers to areas which lack investigation or need closer examination. So if you really pay attention to journal articles, you'll be able to identify research gaps. And I want to pity those students who do not want to go to the internet and search for these journal articles. Please get the most recent, the most relevant and scholarly literature. Once you do that and read the introduction section, read the conclusion section, suggestions for further research and limitation sections, and even the implication sections, you will be able to articulate or identify these research gaps. So please go and read these things. Now, one other approach, ladies and gentlemen, that you can use is to read systematic reviews. Now, if you go to the internet, you'll find papers which are called systematic reviews, and they are there in every discipline, in management, in entrepreneurship, in medicine, in public health, everywhere, in entrepreneurship, in marketing, in supply chain, procurement, right, for auditing, marketing, you find all these systematic reviews. Now, these systematic reviews, ladies and gentlemen, the systematic review papers, they usually delve into the literature, they examine the trends and changes in a discipline or a specific field of study and provide summaries of the literature which can, in some cases, have a lot of research implications. So you just have to do that and read. And moreover, content analysis reports can also be read, citation analysis reports, meta-analytic reports can also be very illuminating and very helpful, especially the latter, which reports the findings of the previous researches. So I want to encourage you to go and look for systematic reviews, right? Look for meta-analytic reviews, ladies and gentlemen. Look for content analysis reports. Look for citation analysis reports or meta-analytic reports. These are very, very, very important, ladies and gentlemen, and the state-of-the-art papers. So another aspect, ladies and gentlemen, is for you to visit the website of the most prominent and influential journals in your field of study. In every field of study, you've got what we call most prominent and influential journals. So start with those journals. Now, these journals, ladies and gentlemen, which are most prominent and influential in your discipline, right? They often have a key concept section, right? If you go to the journal website, right, you'll find a key concept section, and the key concept section aims to assist the journal's audience to develop an appreciation of the central ideas in that field. And to approach the content of articles from a perspective which is informed by present debate on aspects of both theory and practice. So do not leave out what we call the most prominent and influential journals in your field of study, because those journals have that section that we call key concepts. Please make sure that you read them, because they're very important. Now, key concepts are usually very short articles, and each one is dedicated to one specific topic. They are often written by well-known scholars who are experts in that particular field of study or topic. And you may find key concepts in your area as well. There is also a reference section in key concept papers, which introduces the most important papers or books written about the topic. Now, of course, that is why you need to look for those most influential journals. Do not forget to look for the key concepts papers or the most influential papers in your discipline. Now, of course, there is another type of paper that we call the state of the art papers, ladies and gentlemen, the state of the art. Now, the state of the art papers usually summarize the state of knowledge on a specific subject, and that's why they are called the state of the art. They summarize the state of knowledge on a specific subject. Of course, they delimit research frontiers and identify fruitful and promising areas for future research. So you need to look for these things here, and of course, all these can be classified under systematic review papers, ladies and gentlemen. So the issues which we have discussed so far were certainly some general and rather simple approaches of finding gaps, research questions, ladies and gentlemen. And these are very crucial if you want to identify a research topic at this material time, you want to identify research gaps, and of course, research questions. That is how you move around these things. There are also tools, and I want to give you these tools so that you get equipped. There are tools, more sophisticated approaches. So we have tools and more sophisticated approaches which can save you research time and give you better overview of the current trends and areas of interest in your field of study. And one of these tools, ladies and gentlemen, is developed by Thomson Reuters, and is called Essential Science Indicators. So Thomson Reuters, all right, has developed a tool which he has referred to as Essential Science Indicator. Now, some universities have access to this website. Now, if your university has provided you access to this website, then utilize it, ladies and gentlemen. Now, when you go to this website, right, what we have called the Essential Science Indicator, right, this Essential Science Indicator will tell you about the most cited papers in each field, the new areas or branches that have been developing in that particular field. It will also identify the influential individuals, influential institutions, influential papers, influential publications, and influential countries in that particular field. So do not forget to look for the Essential Science Indicator, and is a tool developed by Thomson Reuters, ladies and gentlemen. It is very important for you to know what is happening in your field, right, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I should also tell you, ladies and gentlemen, at this material time, that we've got other tools, right, like what we call the Google Trends, right? So you can also use Google Trends, ladies and gentlemen, in order to find out if the popularity of interest in a topic is increasing or decreasing. You can also use this tool to compare various topics with each other and find out which one is more popular. So Google Trends is an important aspect that you should not ignore, ladies and gentlemen. So Google Trends also provides regional interest index. This piece of information shows which topic is hot or popular and in which country, ladies and gentlemen. So another piece of information provided by Google Trend is what we call related searches, which provides queries similar to yours, and the name of the authors who are active in the topic you have searched will be identified, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there are also other websites that you need to know, and the tools such as the social mention. You can also go to Springer, you can go to Google Ads, and you can also go to Broadreader. Now, these ones provide more sophisticated information regarding the queries, such as their popularity, various bars and charts which demonstrate the trends in different time spans, the most recent articles that have been downloaded, and their related tags, ladies and gentlemen. You can also find a more detailed discussion of these tools in mind maps which are available on the internet. But I can say, as you work with these tools, ladies and gentlemen, and manipulate them, you begin to understand how they work and which one is best for your field of study. But keep one thing in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Try to use one of them and master using it, because there's a lot that you need to learn about some of these. And these tools can save you enormous amount of research time and effort, and open up new doors in your life as you think about the research topic, as you think about a research gap, as you think about a research question. Do not underestimate their value, ladies and gentlemen, and start using them right now. And one more thing for professional researchers, ladies and gentlemen, and this is food for thought, right? What we have just discussed was the conventional approaches, ladies and gentlemen, for identifying gaps or research gaps. And I want you to really listen to this at this material time attentively and think through this, because what I've just given you represents the conventional approaches to identifying research gaps, right? But I want to tell you that some people have actually questioned these conventional approaches. Of course, one of them is Alverson and Sandberg. So at the back of your mind, we are saying, however, although we've gone through all those approaches, we are saying, however, there are always other and new ways of approaching research questions. And for instance, I'm telling you, Alverson and Sandberg 2011 state that although gap spotting is the prevalent way of constructing research questions, these established ways of generating research questions rarely express more ambitious and systematic attempts to challenge the assumptions underlying existing theories. So I'm now taking you to another terrain where you can use other approaches, and I know I'll be covering them in subsequent workshops, right, ladies and gentlemen. But Alverson and Sandberg has challenged the traditional way, the one I've just articulated in the last few minutes. So, and Alverson and Sandberg simply say that old approach, right, yes, is known, and many people have used it to construct research questions, but these, and he calls them established ways of generating research questions, rarely express more ambitious and systematic attempts to challenge assumptions underlying existing theories. So if you're a PhD student and you want to challenge the assumptions underlying existing theories, and you are really an ambitious researcher, right, and you're ambitious and you want to challenge theories, then listen attentively to what Alverson and Sandberg 2011 says. In fact, they propose an alternative method. And this alternative method is what they call developing and proposing problematization as a methodology for identifying and challenging assumptions that underlie existing theories. Right, so Alverson and Sandberg have proposed what we call problematization, right, as a tool. So you develop write and propose problematization as a method for identifying and challenging assumptions that underlie existing theories. And by the way, when I take you, when we meet in that workshop that is forthcoming, where I'm going to discuss issues of literature review, right? Because I'm going to spend time talking about crafting, certainly, a problem, first of all, constructing literature and problematizing literature. So when we reach that stage, I hope you'll be able to appreciate the issues that I'm talking about right now, which were, again, raised by Alverson and Sandberg 2008. And in this case, as he talks about identifying and challenging assumptions that underlie existing theories, he says that based on that, you generate research questions that lead to the development of more interesting and influential theories within management studies, ladies and gentlemen. So they have also developed a typology. Alverson and Sandberg have developed a typology of the type of assumptions that can be problematized in the existing theories. And they have also proposed a set of methodological principles to approach the problematization concept. Now, again, you can see, although appealing, the problematization method can be a bit risky, since it may involve challenging existing paradigms and their underpinning ontological and epistemological assumptions, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, Alverson and Sandberg also mentions it, and he says this approach that he has proposed himself is risky. He says that challenging assumptions is often risky, and he gives the reasons, since it means that you are questioning existing power relations in a scientific field, which may result in upsetting colleagues, upsetting reviewers, upsetting your professors, upsetting the editors, and thus may reduce the chances of having your work accepted by the professor, and maybe also an article, if you're writing an article, having an article published in a journal, ladies and gentlemen. So, if you dare, there can always be new ways of approaching research questions, ladies and gentlemen, although the method proposed by Alverson and Sandberg may not be, for obvious reasons, suitable to you as a PhD student, but if you're a researcher and you want to explore new areas, this is okay. As a PhD student, don't try to take on too ambitious projects, and I'm sure your professors will tell you that. Otherwise, you may not survive. And of course, do not forget that the implicit expectation of the doctoral student is that students will engage in extended inquiry, students will maintain an open mind about the conflicting theories and perspectives advanced by the leaders in the field, and that many students at the end of the required courseworks have questions that interest them, and that questions which could ultimately be phrased as research questions. Now, of course, now let's consider a variety of effective ways to move our agenda from several potential topics which might be interesting to explore, ladies and gentlemen, explore identifying your specific research questions, ladies and gentlemen. It's very important that we do that. Now, of course, as I've already said, I encourage you to consider most of the things that I have mentioned and some of the things that I'm going to mention right now. Please consider them because these things are very useful and very important in your work. So, I will encourage you to consider all these strategies and then create a process that is most compatible with your personal learning style. A first step is to identify some potential questions which you might want to research for your PhD thesis. You might find it useful at this point to note some of the topics and questions which interest you. I told you that look for a topic that is quite interesting, and putting these ideas on paper will help you to progress. Now that you've listed some potential questions that you will need to consider, ladies and gentlemen, of course, I want to give you a criteria that you can use to evaluate these things. So first of all, I'm encouraging you to write those particular topics, those areas which are of interest to you. Now, after you've written them down, start evaluating those topics, those ideas. By using the following questions, you can ask yourself, is it interesting to me? Is it manageable? Is it within the range of my competence, right? You know, some PhD students who have probably in the past done, if a person specialized, let's say in accounting, right, the first degree, and then of course masters, the fellow did accounting and finance, then you may find that the PhD, the fellow wants to go into what we call public health, or probably at the PhD level the fellow wants to do something in the area of marketing. Maybe at the end of the day the fellow wants to go into entrepreneurship, right? I'm not saying that you can't do it, you can do it, but please, you have to think through it very, very, very hard. So ask yourself whether this topic is within the range of your competences. Is the data source reliable? Does it make a significant and original contribution? Is it too controversial? All these are potential questions that you can use to evaluate your topic. Now, of course, review each of the potential questions you've listed above with an objective of either revising or eliminating each from your pool of potential question. And you may also want to add that to the list of questions that you have, ladies and gentlemen. Now that you are ready for the next step, of course you have identified those topics and you have them, and I've given you guidance on how to generate topics, right? I want to take you to another level, right? I want to tell you that please get some kind of form, right? And on the screen here you can see I have attempted to give you a structure that you can follow on the screen here. Please make sure that you follow this. And on the screen here you can see in terms of what we call the columns. I have 3 columns and of course a number of rows. You can have as many as possible. And in the first column, I present issues on the questions and issues which intrigue me. So the questions and issues that intrigue me will constitute the questions, the research questions, and from this you can actually get the research topic. Now, of course, in the second column, I've put what I know about the topic. Right? Do you know anything about the topic? Have you bothered to look for these things? And the third one, the third column, is about represents potential additional resources to address the topic. So as you can see, these are the 3 columns, and the rows there are the requirements that you need to fill in this thing, right? So use the form that you see on the screen here, certainly to organize your notion or notation of the major theorists' research studies, which might help to inform your research for each question. And this is not a very simple task. You might find it useful to work intensively on this grid. You might also identify a large number of issues and connect these issues to the readings that you have done in your course. After you have exhausted your knowledge, ladies and gentlemen, you might brainstorm with some colleagues to expand the resources, to refine the questions, and to remind yourself of additional sources of information. But bearing in mind that as you progress, you are likely to identify some gaps in your knowledge. Depending on the outcomes of this assessment, ladies and gentlemen, you will want to consider a number of options. For example, is this really an unexplored issue? How can I rephrase the question to tap into my knowledge? Are there topics more closely related to my knowledge? Do I know anyone who has conducted research in a similar area? Will the study help in my professional responsibilities or in my future career, ladies and gentlemen? So those are potential questions that you may have to ask yourself. But I can give you also alternative starting points, ladies and gentlemen. So another way to start could involve identifying the topics which have intrigued you, right? Then push the envelope by identifying related and explored all what we call controversial issues. And the third strategy in this case might be to list some questions which are generated from your personal experiences, either at home, at work, at the market, maybe at the bar, or probably at church. Anywhere, please start by generating a list of these things, but based on your personal experience. Then connect your potential exploration of these topics that you have generated with the knowledge you have acquired and the disciplines which you have explored in your course, ladies and gentlemen. Now, a fourth approach, again, these are alternative approaches, might be to review your journal writing or file for potential research, noting the numerous questions that you posed as you reflected on your personal learning throughout your coursework. I'm just imagining that you have been having a journal that you have been keeping, and where you record most of the issues that seem to come up in class when the lecturers or professors are teaching, and of course the discussions that emerge from students, or maybe if you have attended workshops, somehow you listen to the debate and some of the issues come up and you list them down, and these are potential topics, ladies and gentlemen. So these questions have the potential to lead you to an exciting research question. Now, a final suggestion is to engage PhD program professors, brainstorming possible topics, particularly ones which might be aligned with the current research agenda. And of course, the other aspect is that many university bulletins, they usually list the research that's been done by staff of that particular university. Now, of course, by studying the professor's interests, for example, you can start formulating a tentative list of areas which interest you while using the information to seek out publications written by these professors. Now, by becoming more knowledgeable about the professor's work, you are able to obtain a useful direction for your research work, ladies and gentlemen. So, and of course, these are very important issues, as you know very well. And again, I want to encourage you to put this in a sort of matrix. So you do not start by writing your PhD thesis. You start with a topic, you start with the research question, you start with the research gap. You start by identifying a research problem or research gap. So you may write notes as you proceed towards clarifying your questions. And you can use this table again, which you can see on the screen. And on this table, I have got two columns, but of course a number of rows. And in one column, the first column, again, you have intriguing topics or issues. And then, of course, in the second column, you have what we call a different perspective. So you can actually start writing these things and putting them in the table and fitting there the information that you think is important. So you start by writing notes as a process towards identifying your questions, and certainly this table will be useful. Now, these notes may become useful as you advance to the stage of writing your formal PhD thesis. And you'll probably write many pages prior to actually writing text, which will become part of your completed research thesis. So the crucial issue here that you need to bear at the back of your mind is not so much where you start as much as that you start. So you need to start. So it doesn't matter where you start, but the advice is that please start. Start by reading or by talking with colleagues or by asking professors about potential topics that you are considering. Start, ladies and gentlemen. The sooner you start, the likely the higher the chances of completing on time, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't start, you'll have problems, ladies and gentlemen. So once you have a sense of what you might want to research, you are ready to consider requesting for a PhD doctoral committee. But if you are not yet there, then you have no more authority and you have no business in requesting for those particular professors. Ladies and gentlemen, although I'm actually closing in this workshop right now. We have come to the end of the workshop, but I just want to remind you a few questions as you think about your topics, you think about your research gaps, because your professors and the doctoral committee, once it is formed, they will ask you these questions. So I want to give you questions professors are likely to ask you, especially when you approach them with these with your topics or research gaps. So your professors may ask a question. Why do you want to do this research? So you must have an answer. Don't simply go to a professor with a topic and you say, sir, this is my topic, approve my topic. No. You are not an undergraduate student. You are not a diploma student, and you are no longer a master's student. You are advancing knowledge, and we've been discussing issues of research gaps, research problems, and you know what these things are. So a professor will ask you, why do you want to do this research? You must have answers at your fingertips. He will ask you, how did you pick this topic? And some professors may even say, well, were you inspired? Did you dream? Right? Is this topic as a result of dreaming or daydreaming, whatever it is? So you must have justifications for this, and you must have answers. How did you pick the topic? How are you doing with your literature search? Right? They want to know what you are doing. What are your hurdles about what your findings may reveal? What are your reasons for choosing this strategy? How is your study likely to contribute to our knowledge, right? What other procedures might you consider? What are the competing theories which are being addressed in your study? Do not say that, no, I will wait and wait. But you've been studying in all these courses you have covered. There are theories, numerous theories that have been put forward. You must have an idea of these theories, because theories actually help you to explain reality out there. Then, of course, other questions will revolve around what is the basic argument which you are addressing in your study. So the basic argument must come up. How well are you addressing this issue? What are you going to do next, and why? After this, what are you going to do, and why are you doing it? What problems are you finding, ladies and gentlemen? How are you handling them? What criteria will you use in selecting your sample? All these are questions that will be put forward by your professor, and you must have answers. What theories implicitly or explicitly are contributing to the design of your study? What are the philosophical perspectives that you are going to consider in this study? Can you document the historical evolution of this theory? Right? It's not a matter of simply having an inventory of theories. I'm using stakeholder theory, I'm using the social capital theory, I'm using resilience theory, I'm using resource-based theory, I'm using... No, it's not a question of, but have you picked material about one of those theories, and have you really articulated that theory? You understand it very well. So if a professor asks you, can you document the historical evolution of this theory, will you be able to provide that information? He's not asking for too much. This level of doing a PhD requires that. He may also ask you, how will the findings of your study influence our knowledge or practice? Right? Because at the end of the day, the research that you are undertaking, ladies and gentlemen, must help you articulate those issues of practice. So I hope this workshop has been very helpful. And I hope the workshops that we have conducted prior to this one have also been very useful and insightful. And I hope you'll be able to use the knowledge that you pick from these workshops to go back and reflect on your work, remembering that you are doctoral students, right? And if you are a doctoral student, ladies and gentlemen, then you must think about the level that you have reached. This is PhD level and not master's level, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for attending this workshop. I know it's not very easy, and this workshop is workshop 5 in the series PhD seminar. We call them PhD seminar series in business management. And our topic that we have just covered today, ladies and gentlemen, do not forget, is navigating the PhD terrain, but specifically handling issues of identifying a PhD research topic, identifying a PhD research question, identifying research gaps, ladies and gentlemen. So in this lecture, I gave you, again as a recap, I gave you an introduction. I also took you through getting your PhD working environment. And if you recall, in that working environment, I told you that you can work independently. You can also work with colleagues, and these are the students who are pursuing PhD at the same university or other universities. And you can also collaborate with professors, and you can pick a lot of information from these people and pick interest in them because they will be your mentors. The third aspect that we have discussed in this workshop is identifying your research problem and research questions and research gaps. And finally, we've ended at a time when I did give you questions professors are likely to ask you when you approach them with the topics and with any write-up. I'll be giving you more insights into this. I wish you a nice time. I can only say stay well, stay safe. I wish you a nice time. Bye.